Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashrothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show's continued coverage of the CSM 16 election with our interviews, this time with Maldavius of the Strybog Clade. How you doing, Maldavius?
Doing really good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. We done a lot of interviews, got a lot to do, got to get right into it. So let's begin by explaining the rules. I have 50 minutes to explore the candidacy with the candidate. I can ask whatever questions, explore as I need to, in order to figure out what makes them a strong candidate, why you might want to vote for them. After I take that time, I give them a 10-minute warning for them to go over anything that I may have missed, stress any points that they think are particularly important, or give any final presentations. And when they are done, we agree, and it gets thrown over to YouTube, where it goes on the playlist for you to watch, so that way you can become informed, which is the point of all of this, for us to have an informed electorate, so that way we can have an effective CSM, because it is a powerful tool for us, for our players, but it's only as good as we make it. So, to that end, Maldavius, this is your first time running for CSM, is that correct?
Yeah, that's totally true. I've been playing the game since 2007, though, so I've been here a long time, just never ran for CSM.
Right, and also at the beginning, I make sure to give any conflicts of interests that I may have, which of course you and I worked together during invasions. You and I have worked on political things involving Pashfin a few times, and you know we have a history together, but I don't know whether or not we're allies at any given time. So I'll say that. But you know, either way,
I've killed you a few times. Yeah,
but we do have mutual interest when it comes to the game design and the game of Eve. Yeah. So we have a lot of really good things to talk about.
When it comes to Eve, we're definitely on the same page, like wanting to make the game as good as it possibly can be. Absolutely.
So to that end, you are mostly known as basically one of the most established groups, or the leader, I should say, of one of the most established groups within Pochfin, which is the new kind of sector of space, the 27 systems taken by the Triglavian Collective and those that were loyal to them during the course of invasions. And now it exists as kind of this super wormhole connected network, which is with its own rules, resources, and risks. However, there's been a lot of challenges with Pochfin and a lot of criticism of Pochfin, and more importantly, a lot of lack of understanding of Pochfin. So let's begin for everyone. What do you believe is the purpose and value of Pochfin?
So Pochfin is basically giant Thera. That's probably the easiest way that I can describe this place. It is a set of 27 different systems that can connect to basically anywhere in the game very, very rapidly. So if you want to get from one side of New Eden to the other, you pop into Pochfin, you go 3 jumps, and you can get out the other side of New Eden very quickly. The best way to describe it is it's a subway system mechanically. You get on, you go down into the metro, you get in there, you take a train, like a couple of jumps, and you are literally on the other side of the entire galaxy. It's phenomenal. It's really, really cool for that kind of thing. Outside of that, it doesn't have asset safety, just like Wormhole Space. It doesn't have local, just like Wormhole Space. It's nullsec, just like Wormhole Space. But it has NPC stations, so if you want to stash your stuff in the NPC stations, you can. And the services in the NPC stations are also locked to behind standings. So if you want to like repair or anything like that, you need standings with the Triglavian Collective to do that. It used to have standings required for the gates, so it would stop people from going those, but they removed that for all but the home systems right now. But in terms of that subway system that I was talking about, each one of the systems in Pochfin has, within 3 jumps of where it used to be geographically on the map, it will connect to one of those with a static wormhole. So you can always get into Pochfin based on where it used to be. And that's a really cool thing. So if you know where to look, you find the way in, then you know where to look to get your way out. And you can get anywhere in the game.
Yeah, it is definitely one of those places that really, really rewards understanding how to use it.
Yeah. That is 100% true. We've actually used a bunch of wild mechanics in here during fights, too. Like, one of the things that was really weird, it doesn't work anymore because the gates are open, but Wirashoda used to be 3 jumps away from Otanumi. Otanumi and Wirashoda are both inside of Pochfin. So we could roll Wirashoda into Otanumi, and we could roll Otanumi into Wirashoda and lock K-Space out completely. When we were fighting against Fraternity, that's exactly what we did. So we shut down all K-Space connections, and they took a 250-man fleet, went, what do we do? And then left. And we won some of our timers that way.
Right.
It's very fun.
That's another thing that I really like to. That's, in my opinion, one of the biggest values of Pochfin is the idea of the individual story, right? And
Yeah.
this is true in a lot of different ways, but one of the ways it is that these systems, these 27 systems of Pochfin, on the one hand, they're all kind of Pochfin, right? But on the other hand, each one of them, although they all follow the same basic rules, the implementation of each is unique, right? Those two systems can be linked into each other, which makes those two systems able to be basically rolled out in a way that all of the others can't. Some of them have other structures, some of them don't. Some of them are closer to Jita, some of them are closer to other places. And therefore, again, each, on the one hand, Pochfin is one region, but on the other hand, in a way that is true in almost no other space, including wormholes, which you would actually expect it to be that way in wormholes. I almost feel like it's more true in Pochfin that every system is both connected and individual.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I would see that. I mean, Pochfin's really weird because of the fact that it's so easy to get into now. Because you can go into any wormhole to get in here, and you can travel around the triangle super easily. You can use a filament to get inside and travel around the triangle super easily. Like it's a very easy place to get into now, and I think that that's increased the traffic pretty dramatically. Like we see quite a lot of people in here now. I would kind of put it akin to something like Perimeter, but with no local on some days, usually on the weekend. Like just a ton of traffic, like an absolute ton of traffic, because people just show up and they're like, where am I now? Or the alternative thing and the weird thing, which I don't think is quite healthy for the game, wormholers are using it as a way to extract when they're getting evicted right now. So what they do
right.
is they use a filament and wormholes to bounce out, and then they secure all of their assets, which is a little weird. I think that that's kind of a strange thing to use for it. Filaments are kind of, they've got a lot of strange problems with just denying of PvP and denying of, victory in PvP right now.
And
And
here,
we see them show up in Pochfin, and sometimes we kill them if we can catch them in time.
yeah. And here is actually a really good reason why the CSM exists, because there's all these different playstyles with all their different conflicting interests. So let me just bounce it over to you. Like, one of the main solutions that I've heard come up with is some sort of spool up timer, and maybe even a lengthy one, 10 seconds to a minute. You use these Pochfin filaments for just general navigation. Do you think that that would be unduly burdensome for there to be a new spool up timer added to these filaments, or do you think that it is in order?
Honestly, I think a spool up timer would be a fine addition. And the reason why is I don't think it should be like a minute. It shouldn't be like crazy long. But one of the biggest problems, and I'll give you an example of a situation I was in. I was out doing those EOM sites, right? Like during that last event, hacking them. And another Hunter Aster landed in the site with me and started locking me up, and I filamented. In
Right.
the dungeon, you can just filament right there, and I was gone. I don't think that's good for the game. I mean, I'm going to do it, obviously. Like, I'm not going to let myself just get killed. But I don't. It felt greasy. It didn't feel right, and I see that happen a lot. You can use them while you're moving too, and I don't
Right.
think that that's correct. Like, there probably should be a spool up, and I think a spool up makes sense. Like maybe 10, 15 seconds even. Give them enough time to engage on you, and you shouldn't be able to use them while you're scrammed either. And
Right.
and you can not when
Yeah.
a player hits you, but if like an NPC has you scrammed, you can just leave while you
Correct.
have the scram on you. It's really weird.
Yeah,
Like, I think if
because
you're engaged in PvE combat even, you shouldn't be able to use it.
right,
Like,
it's based on
a
the
lot of weird
PvP
restrictions
flag.
like that.
But I
Yeah.
agree that putting a PV making it so that the PvE flag just simply makes it so it doesn't work as well would be a valid solution. I don't know if that would have other effects on like people that use yeet filaments and stuff like that, because I know that they get tired when they have to like shoot at an MTU and they're like, oh, now I have to wait 15 minutes. But especially since there's like rat gate camps, you don't want one rat like shooting you at a gate camp and now reset your 15-minute timer or some bullshit. But
Hmm.
at the same time, I do agree that like a short timer, spool up timer with a scram that shuts it off in the same way of like a micro jump drive would make perfect sense. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that works a lot better than the idea of like creating a trace that can be followed by the other people, because that has its own exploits, right? Like, if there's a way
Yeah.
for other people to follow through, then that's just a way to stuff more people through than the filament should allow, or
Well,
something like that.
you could cap it. You could cap it so that it can only do 15, but then people are only going to extract 15. I wanted there to be some kind of a way, because I had talked about this before, of like maybe let people follow you through the filament. But like there are weird issues with that, obviously. Like how many people are allowed through? Is it a mass limit? Can you get more than the 15 are allowed on the 15 filament? But there should be some kind of counterplay there, some ability to stop that person from getting away or to follow them through and kill them. Either way, it should be done in some way. I just don't think there's any type of counter to it right now other than like, oh, that guy's gone. I guess, well, great, and that's it. And I don't think that's good. And I think
I
the
agree.
similar thing is for wormholers. Like if you do a good eviction, if you manage to box them in, you stop them from escaping, and then they just fill them in all their valuables, that feels weird to me. I don't think that's good.
The
Like
other
if you pull something off like that, you should be rewarded for it.
Sure. And the distinction that I heard, which is important, is that like a nullsec filament doesn't actually get you to safety, right? Like it gets you out of the wormhole, but it's out of the frying pan and into the fire. Apparently, there's speaking of fire. I don't know if you guys can hear the the fire truck or whatever outside, but I apologize for that. Either way, so that just totally distracted me.
Worries?
Where were we? Oh yeah, Pochfin filming out. The nullsec filaments puts them in a dangerous position. Pashfin is close enough to highsec in enough places that they feel pretty safe with using a Pashfin filament, and then they're basically immediately back in highsec. They could just stay cloaked in Pashfin for 15 minutes, and they're good to go.
See, that's the one detriment to Pochfin, though, is all the wormholes open inward. So we only get K162s inside of Pochfin, except for in a very few types, which is like, I think there's an X450 that goes out to nullsec sometimes, and that's an outbound, wormhole. But all the other ones are inbounds, and they don't show up inside until they're in, at the last 4 hours of the lifespan of the wormhole. So if they do filament in, they can't scan their way out, but they can wait until someone scans their way in, or have a scout around there. Like, if they want to take a Perun filament, they can do a scout around those Perun systems, and they'll have their way out. It's pretty easy to get back to highsec, like really, really easy.
Right. And like a border system, 1/3 chance of being able to extract basically 2 JITA, more or less.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's a little bit of a simplification, but that not by much.
Yeah, not by much.
But either way, so okay. That's an interesting thing. I appreciate you exploring it with me, because it's one of those situations where it's like it affects other areas of space, but it definitely affects your area of space. And I want to get maybe back to those filaments in a little bit, but I do want to talk about Pochfin structures and capitals, because this is one of those things that is like really not understood by the player base, in my opinion, where often I see that either all of the structures should be removed, or players should be able to anchor new structures, or whatever. I personally feel like both of those solutions don't really get the value of structures, or rather would at least devalue what we have right now. What is your feelings on it? And why don't you explain a little bit?
So at first it was kind of cool. It was like, oh man, we have these things and no one will ever have another one of them. But after living in Pochfin for so long now, like what, it's like 6 months now, 7 months, something like that. Many of those systems are dead now.
Right.
Meaning there's no Citadels left in them. Some of them even have no NPC stations. You look at Otilla and Otnumi, there's nothing left in there. Attila actually has nothing at all. There's no NPC stations whatsoever. No one goes there. They're becoming dead systems. And that's what I was really worried about when we were talking about this before, is if all of the Citadels get destroyed in Pochfin, all you have is an interspace highway. And I don't think that is a very interesting or cool idea for this kind of space. The Triglavian, region that is created probably shouldn't just be an empty highway. That doesn't seem right to me. So
I agree.
One of the things that I put forward that I'd really like to do, and it's up on my website on Maldavius.space, is I'd really like players to be able to put down new Citadels. And the reason why is when we first moved into Pochfin, the idea was to have rival clades, one in each third of Pochfin, right? So like one in Kryvelis, one in Perun, one in Svarog, and we were going to fight each other. There were multiple alliances that were going to fight each other like this.
Mm-hmm.
Then, right as we got in there, we found out we can't put down new Citadels. We couldn't fight. The only thing we could do is have fleet battles, but you can't kill each other's Citadels because it's gone forever. That cooled off the entire region instantly. That's why we have the blue triangle meme. Like, all of this stuff happened because we went, well, we can't replace them. So if we killed one of our allies' Citadels, even though we're frenemies, we all lose. Everybody loses forever, and you can't do anything about it. So, like, I want us to be able to put down new citadels so we can go back to fighting. Aside from that, the wormhole mechanics are in play in terms of citadel timers in here, which means if you bash a citadel, it's only got like a day before it comes out of reinforce. It's really, really fast. And every one of these timers has to be won 100% of the time, or you lose that citadel forever. That's really stressful on line members. And after, over time, that gets more and more stressful. I don't know if that's good, like for those players. It feels like the most invested players in this content have one of the hardest times engaging with the content, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get away with, or get away from, is stop that from being a thing, if that makes sense.
But do you feel sufficiently rewarded for holding it? I mean, okay.
No, I would say that it feels good when we hold it, but at the same time, there's always that creeping fear of like anyone could come in here, anyone could use a bunch of 15-man filaments. And in fact, not long ago, someone bought all the 15-man Velis filaments in the game.
That's not a threat.
There were 3 on markets anywhere in the game. And like we notice that stuff. We talk about that stuff. And it's just like anyone could just go like, oh, I'm going to drop a 500-man fleet into Pochfin at any time from anywhere in the video game. And like, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. You can't stop them. You can't block them. They're not Sinos. You can't jam your system like you would be able to in nullsec. They're instant. You can't see the guy lighting a Sino and then go stop him because it doesn't work that way. They just filament in. And you're like, well, okay. So like, if you're not able to rebuild from that, the alternative is just slowly, slow atrophy. And I don't think that's good. I don't think that's good for the region. I think it's bad long term. It's cool for the moment, but it's bad long term.
That's fair. And who knows? Maybe they have like a plan for when it decays past a certain point or something like that. Or maybe they'll build up, because they certainly seem to need to really drive your point home. We've talked about this before on other shows, but I'll just make sure to bring it up now. There are, in the design, there's what's the home systems, which are clearly designed to be a sort of fortress, right? Because you require extremely high standings comparatively, like hours and hours, days of work to grind up to even be able to use the gates to get into it. There are ways to break in, but none of them are guaranteed in the same way as just being able to use the gates. And so the design is that the most loyal... Well, I mean, like for an invader that doesn't have the standings is what I'm saying, has a much harder time.
You don't need the standings to invade a home system. In fact, we just lost a timer in one of our home systems just now. So we just had a shield pop, even though we fought it.
That's fair.
7.0 standings are one way to get in, but the wormhole and filaments are the other way. And filaments have a 1 in 3 chance of landing in the right home system. You just throw people at it until you do it, and then they can just sit in the system and cloak up or whatever. And in I believe 2 of the home systems, there's this NPC station as well. Ours doesn't have one, so that sucks.
I thought it was only one of them do. That was my that was the point that was the point that I was trying to get to, which is that like these home systems, even if you argue that they are more permeable than that, it doesn't matter because they can't live in them. Yeah, in chat they're confirming only Kino has stations. So 2 out of the 3 home systems can't be a home system. Like,
correct.
How is that? Like, I feel like there's little things like that.
It's weird. Well, the anchorage, man. Like, if they do something with the anchorage, and that's what I want them to do something with the anchorage. Like, make it dockable, make it some kind of Triglavian mission center, whatever. That should be a home for people who are aligned with Triglavians.
My point is that my concern is, are we worried about the wrong problems, right? Like, shouldn't, if structures, if the MPC structures in Pashfin gave you better bonuses to make up for the standings requirements, such that operating in a Pochfin station was about the same as using a player structure, then the need to hold these structures wouldn't be as critical, and you would just be encouraged to use the Triglavian facilities, which I think feels a little bit more proper as opposed to less, especially in a world in which they seem to not want you to have these structures in the long term. But even then, it falls apart when they don't have them in the home systems. And so that's why I was saying, like, this clearly feels like maybe they should progress the story by maybe making these guys build up a little bit more in these Pochfins. Maybe it's time to grow something in the soil.
Well, here's the thing, though, is I think it actually gives a really cool opportunity for CCP to make something new and interesting, right? Like, we've I'll give you a really good example, right? Like we've got Citadels and we've got those basic ones and we've got all the faction Citadels and stuff like that. It'd be really cool to have Triglavian and edencom Citadels, even if they were just, slightly different in some way. I wish that there was more stuff going on with the invasion content, not just for the Trig people, but also for edencom side. Edencom side has nothing right now. There's nothing going on in those edencom fortresses. In fact, I went and talked to some people from the edencom side and found out that the dread sites that we get in Pochfin,
Mm-hmm.
they get 2 at a time,
Mm-hmm.
randomly distributed over like 50 fortress systems. Where are they going to find those? They can't even find the things, and that's I don't think that's a good reward for them either. They took a lot more systems than we did, and they basically have nothing, So I think that there's definitely some stuff that CCP can do here to add some really cool gameplay to these areas. I think Citadels would be a cool one. I think it'd be neat to have bonuses to like an edencom side Citadel inside of Fortress systems. I think it'd be neat to have bonuses to a Triglavian style, Citadel inside of Pochfin. And then they can actually rally around that and be like, hey, I'm an edencom player. I'm a Triglavian player in a way that kind of faction warfare never really did. I think that's the thing is this to me right now feels like a faction warfare new game plus, and I think it's very, very cool, but it's not drawing enough to a lot of different players. We have Pochfin, edencom has basically nothing, and they need more opportunities, more incentives to move into these systems and align themselves with these factions.
Do you think that so CCP kind of went half-assed when it came to the commitment of like player choice, right? Edencom exists not to give players a faction to rally behind, but to give you an enemy to hate you that isn't the actual empire itself, right? Because like in faction warfare, if I join the Galente, now the Caldari hate me. And if I do that for long enough, now the Caldari are always going to shoot at me all the time, wherever. And that's seen as like a problem. And it's a reason why people don't join faction warfare. And it really feels like edencom exists so that way there's a team to hate you that isn't
Sure.
the general Concord or the general empires. Do you feel like that might have been a mistake and that they should there should be higher consequences to one of the things I've suggested is that they should auto fortress all of the 1.0 systems just to make it so that it's even harder for Triglavians to, you get Pashfin, which is the subway, but walking around the streets is now dangerous for you. Would you be...
I mean, if we were going to do it that way, let's just make Jita up for contests. We'll see who wins.
I mean, it is blue.
Just saying, I mean, I don't think the idea of doing 1.0 systems for edencom is the greatest. I don't think that's a good idea because you've got a lot of players that want to engage in this, and if you make all those systems edencom, you're just going to have a lot of people that are like, oh, I want dual standings, which is what they do right now. If you go into Pochfin and you kill a single drifter, you're positive with edencom and with Triglavians, which that also doesn't feel right. I think that that's really bad. So you're really not incentivizing people to choose there. You're incentivizing them to go get dual standings and then ignore the system entirely. So what I think honestly should be done is I think there should be more incentives for players to choose a side, and I think there should be less situations where they can get both sides, like Triglavian and drone, or sorry, the drone and drifter kills giving you both sides is very strange. I think that's really, really odd.
Yeah.
The minor victories don't really do anything right now. There's nothing going on in those systems. The edencom fortress systems don't actually do anything right now. And Pochfin is definitely not finished. But, we know that they're working on it. They said for this quadrant, they're working on Pochfin for the whole quadrant. So maybe they'll release some new really cool stuff. And I'm kind of excited to see what they come up with.
So one of the issues with edencom is that a lot of the pro edencom players that I know, they're so jaded at this point that if you asked them, how do we make this better? Their answer is, you can't. When I say, well, do you want more edencom? How can we give edencom, maybe Kasha Valkyr should give you more messages. And they're like, no, at this point, we want edencom to go away and give us something else to deal with because this is burned. Do you sincerely believe that that's true? Is this just bitterness? Do you think that this is salvageable in any way?
I think it's absolutely salvageable. Because here's the thing, right? You're always going to have people that are bitter that were there on the ground floor. There's a lot of our own people that are bitter that were there on the ground floor as well. People that felt like they got burned by the invasion, people that felt like, Pochfin wasn't what they wanted. There was people on the edencom side that are like, what the hell? We feel like NPCs. Like I've talked to a lot of people across both sides about all of this kind of stuff. And really what it comes down to is if CCP comes back and goes, hey, we made something really cool for this side and we made something really cool for this side, that you guys can get a benefit in the systems that you help take, then I think that a lot of people will just be like, you know what? That's cool. I'm going to go live there. And I think that once that starts and people start pouring into those systems and actually using that space in a way that is like, hey, we're living in an edencom system. We're edencom people. Let's go fight Triglavians. That would be really neat. And I think that the problem right now is the reward structure just isn't there. And there's no real reason to live in Pochfin at all. And there's no real reason to live in an edencom fortress system at all. There's no real benefit to living in these places right now. If you live in Pochfin, cool, but you can also live in K-space right outside and be one jump away at all times because the wormholes are static. Like, what's
Yeah.
the point? Where's the actual real benefit there? And once the Citadels are all wiped out of the region, there'll be even less benefit to living in there. So that's kind of the thing that I'm thinking right now is like, what would help spur that community into rebanding? Because to be honest with you, edencom is all but gone. The players have mostly disbanded. They've stopped interacting with Triglavians in any way that is, realistic or interesting anymore. And from the Triglavian community, Triglavians are either like, I'm living in Pochfin or I'm waiting for Pochfin to be finished. And there's no real, direction for that right now. It's mostly just like people just going, CCP, what's going to happen?
Right. Yeah,
And that's kind of the thing right now. Is I don't think there's a good reward for that.
I agree that like pessimism is easy when the answers it continues to not exist, right? So
Yeah.
once if suddenly an amazing solution happens, then it would be much more difficult for them to remain bitter in the face of that. But I think that that's a really big key piece to all of this, which is that like this is very new. Like for a long time,
Oh,
this
yeah.
idea of like player choice and this level of conflict, it's been experimented with before, but this goes all the way back to the Sancha incursions where like people started trying to side with Sancha and CCP like didn't expect it and so kind of had to work it into the lore or whatever. This was the very first time that like legitimately we could like two-side it in a way that like was real, had consequences and all that kind of stuff. So in spite of the flaws in its execution, I think it is worth noting that this is an experiment in this kind of conflict that has not only never happened before in Eve, but really is very rare in gaming space. And so a lot of missteps are part of that. But Eve has traditionally been more about player story and the lore has been kind of in the background for many, many years. In the last couple of years, it's like, okay, we're gonna be about the lore again. And it's been great for my show. It's been great for, other people that are into that kind of stuff, and it's allowed a lot of older players that have been part of this for a long time to seek or to get recognized in ways that that's really cool. But it also means that CCP doesn't seem to be fully prepared to deal with this and to have follow-up within things. And I call this the edencom problem, but it continues to go without. So like, how do we help an agile development studio have continuity and consistency in their story to make it so that when the invasion cycle is over and the devs move on to the next thing or go to vacation, it doesn't feel like the edencom got forgotten?
Yeah. So the way to do that is feedback. And one of the things that I've been doing quite a lot, since running for CSM at this point, like for quite a while now, it's been 2 months, something like that. I've just been giving feedback to them. I've been collecting feedback from our community. I've been collecting feedback from the edencom community, the ones that will talk to me that aren't like, oh, Gur Strybog, because I'm a Triglavian guy. But like, I've just been collecting all of that information. I've been putting it into packages and then sending it along to CCP. And I've gotten a lot of really good response out of it, frankly. It's one of the things that in many other areas, people will tell me, it's even people that are like running for CSM now, like, oh, don't tell CCP, they'll never change anything. Or don't tell CCP, they don't care about that kind of stuff. They do. They care a lot. You just have to talk to them. And I found very, very quickly, if you bring something up and you say, hey, this sucks, or hey, this is what the players are feeling, or hey, this is going on, they're really responsive to it. You just have to do it. So that's what we've been doing, is collecting all that information. I go through probably between, I don't know, like 8 and 10 pages of feedback a day, talk to players, go into the community, have like chats with my alliance, have chats with people from edencom, It's like between 8 and 10 hours a day, I would say, right now, of just doing that kind of feedback collection and data collection and then giving that along to CCP. And I could do that because I work from home. So I'm just like, sweet, I'm doing it on this monitor and I'm, programming on the other monitor. And that's the thing that I think they need right now. For them to not make another mistake with the invasion content, for them to not let players down, you need to tell them what let you down. They can't read your mind. They can only look at the big data from the game. They can only look at things like, oh, Pochfin doesn't have any traffic. We should open the gates. That's the only type of stuff that they can see. So tell them how it feels. Tell them what it means to be engaged in this content, and you'd be surprised at how much they care. And that's really the kind of thing that I'm going for is fix that communication bridge. Have the players talk to CCP and have CCP talk back to the players. If we can fix that, we can stop these problems before they start.
Good answer, solid answer, and a good reason why, or a good demonstration why you would make an effective CSM candidate or CSM member, because that's exactly what a CSM member should be doing, is collecting the player feedback and giving it to CCP. But do you feel like you've moved the needle at all? Do you feel like this has actually been doing any good, or are you shouting at the wind?
I don't feel like I'm shouting at the wind at all. I've had a lot of really good discussions. Been talking to a bunch of different members of CCP, and they're great. In fact, I actually got to give one of them out to my community yesterday because I got screenshot permission for it and sent it out to everybody of the conversation that we had about a lot of the problems that people were dealing with in Pochfin. They were really receptive to it immediately, and I think that is all this needs. It just needs people talking to them in a coherent manner that are not just screaming at them saying, you ruined my game. And that's all I've been doing. So I think that, yes, it does matter. Yes, they are listening. And let's just wait to see what the next big patch is, frankly. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to is like, we gave all this feedback. We tried everything we could to talk. Let's see what happens. Let's see how they solve the problems that we've given them. And that's really what it comes down to is give them the problems that you're facing as a player and let them as developers solve that problem. Any of the the features and things, the ideas that I've put on my website and things like that, those are potential solutions to the problems that players brought to me, and sending those up to CCP. And that's a good thing. You want to give, hey, these are the problems that players are facing. Here are some of the solutions to those problems, but also what do you guys can figure out what you want to do with these problems. Figure out what you want to how you want to solve this, because they've got a better view of the entire game on that data side, and we've got a better view of the entire game on the feeling side of like, is this fun, is this engaging, do I want to do this thing? And that's something that's always been the case in game development everywhere that I've ever worked, the entire time that I've been in the industry for 16 years now. It's always come down to, what is a player feeling? As a dev, you have no idea until you ask them. You have no clue. There's no way to tell. So you have to talk.
Yeah, and that is honestly a big part in which game design and play end up breaking down, because the player interprets this as a competition, right? And so will often interpret the developer as a competitor, or an antagonist, and will see the developer as having like wanting to make things dangerous or difficult or whatever. When really most of the time in game design, as you well know, it's about creating experiences, right? Negative situations, positive situations. It's about creating emotional states and just as much as like watching a movie or whatever. But now you have to trick players into taking part in one way or another in an interactive medium. Like that's the whole point. And so what often happens,
say trick them, but yeah.
Well, varying degrees depending on the game design. There's a really great GDC talk called "Game Design is a Magic Trick," but either way, I digress. But my point is that it isn't about like always making the players happy, and it isn't about making the thing hard versus not hard. It's about figuring out what the intended experience is and how to get them there. If that makes making it harder, then that's it. If that means giving them the solution, then that's it.
So I wouldn't say that, though. In a sandbox game, I wouldn't say intended experience. And the reason why is, as a dungeon master, as a DM in a game of D&D, you have an idea for how you want that story to go, but it's really up to the players to drive that direction. They could be like, you know what? I don't want to go kill the Lich. I'm going to go to this town over here and go to the bar and find out what's going on. That's Eve. Eve allows you to do that. So they may have a narrative in mind, but players are going to drive that in whatever direction they want it to go. So I don't know if there's an intended experience in so much as they put things on the table and they go, what are the players going to do with it?
Yeah.
And that's usually what I see throughout all of Eve,
what I meant by that is like, for instance, the use of challenge. Like, what usually people will be like, that makes it harder. That makes it, like, the industry thing. Like, sometimes those negative experiences are designed in order to make a more complex emotional state, or better yet, the fira, the emotional state of victory over that challenge, doesn't exist if that challenge is either non-existent or undermined in some way. And so that ultimately becomes the primary goal. And I kind of forgot what
Sure.
brought us onto this
I
particular.
have no idea. We went off on a tangent
But
somewhere.
oh, that's what it is. Because my point is that often when players give feedback about things, they say this is broken or this needs to get fixed. When really what it boils down to is, I had this negative emotional state because of this, and that led me to want to fix the solved problem. And therefore, I think that this is what's wrong. And therefore, I'm going to tell you to fix that. And then as a game developer, they now need to, like, reverse engineer what's going on, because the player doesn't necessarily know what the design scope is in order to figure out what
Sure.
really fixes the issue. So as a game design, as a person with history in the game design field, you can help the player base communicate better, because you can kind of see things from an eye of a developer as opposed to an eye of a player.
Yep. And that's the thing is, like, I both play the game and I develop games. So when I hear a bunch of people saying this feels bad or this is broken, I go, how is it broken? Tell me more about this. Tell me about what part of this feels broken. What part of this UI doesn't make sense? What part of this thing that is going on that is hampering your gameplay? Why is it doing that? And it's funny too, because I would say between like 50-60% of the time, it's actually there's like a UI feature or something that they missed
Mm-hmm.
and they just didn't know about it because Eve is like this massive game with all these different features. But in the other part of the time, it's like, hey, no, that makes sense. Let's think of like a reason for why you're feeling this way. Let's think of a reason for why you were trying to use the UI in this way, and then kind of go from there, and then just package that up and find out how many players feel that way. How many people have the same experience? If you do an A/B test and you change this thing, is it different for the first group or is it different for the second group? That's all basic game design stuff. It's literally just talk to as many players as you possibly can, gather as many experiences as you can together, find the most frequent pain point among all of them, and then hammer that one down. And that's pretty normal, especially in a live service game.
Yep. But at the same time, has been basically one of the 5 million is questions, 5 billion is questions in EVE Online, right? Like, is helping CCP understand the different perspectives of the player base and helping the player base help understand each other, right? Like, because it's too easy to get stuck in the forest for the trees in a game as complex as this. So, but let me ask you this. What do you say to people who maybe, like, in a null block or highsecker or something like that, that maybe thinks that Pochfin is just some niche thing that too much effort and attention has been paid into already, and while it's incredibly useful that you're getting all this feedback and that stuff like that, clearly there's already a good feedback channel. So we don't need
Sure.
a CSM guy that's a Triglavian. We need more faction warfare representatives or high-sec representatives, or, God forbid, more null-sec representatives. What do you say to those people that think that Pochfin doesn't deserve a full-fledged representation?
I would say that anytime that you have CCP engaging in a new area of space or a new section of the game, or they're trying out something like this, that what they learn in building that is going to have ripple effects across the entire game. They're going to learn things while they're working on Triglavian versus edencom that are probably going to change faction warfare down the road. If they get as much feedback as they possibly can on this, they're going to learn more and then be able to design other systems in the game better. So anytime they have something where they've tried something new, throw everything you can at them. Help them design that thing out. Give them the feedback you can, because it's going to make them stronger so that they can make the rest of the game stronger. I think that anytime players go, oh, it's terrible that they're spending time on whatever area of space or whatever system that isn't the system that I'm touching, that's not going to lead to good things. You want them to make the game better, and that means sometimes making the game in an area that you're not currently a part of. Like, if they made a faction warfare thing right now, I'd be like, that's cool. If they made something for nullsec right now, I'd be like, that's cool. It wouldn't directly affect me, but anytime they're updating anything in the game, they're able to learn from that, learn from how players are interacting with the game, and get better at this. So, like, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about them. Support them so they can make other stuff better.
So in case that somebody like isn't into Pochfin or all that stuff, but they want to,
Sure.
you know, or not like living in Pochfin, they're not part of Strybog, but they're very interested in you because of your game design chops and all that sort of stuff. Like, speak for a little bit about what will you represent, or how will you represent non Triglavians, non Pochfin representatives or residents, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you're part of Triglavian or edencom or any of that kind of stuff. If you are a player of this game and you find something that really, really bothers you about this game, or something you think would be really cool, send me an email to Maldavius, or send me an email to gopiratsoftware@gmail.com, or get on Discord and message me at Thor number 5264. Hit me up. Talk to me. Tell me about the things that you want to do. I work from home. I stay basically at my desk almost all day, and I got my phone if I'm not at my desk. And I sit here and I talk to people constantly about their adventures in Eve, the things that they want to add, the things that they want to change, the stuff they don't like. And it doesn't matter if you're part of the Triglavian stuff. I'm just the alliance leader of the Triglavians, right? You know, the alliance leader of Strybog Clade. That doesn't mean that's the only thing I care about in the game, not in the slightest. And you know, there's a lot of areas of the game that need some love. Wormholes absolutely need some love. They've had they've had a lot of problems for a long time, and now the filament system is making it even harder for wormholers to live in there as well, because we talked about the fact that people can just extract all their stuff. If you're a wormhole alliance that relies on evictions to do your stuff, you're not getting any eviction money anymore. That's completely changed the whole game for those people in a way that denies PvP. That's rough. That's a tough thing. Those are types of things that I like to talk about. What did CCP do to change the game? And can that be fixed in a way that retains cool playstyles like that without denying conflict? So talk to me. Yeah, just come up and talk to me.
To that
And if
end,
you're like nervous about talking to me, like don't be. Just a nerd like everybody else on here, dude.
so, and to that end, earlier you're the one that brought up the effect of filaments and wormholes. I did not, which means you are both aware of it and, you know, on top of that topic, and that is worth noting. So, you know, you're bringing to the table discussion points outside of your purview, or even would even potentially have negative consequences within your own scope, and that's noteworthy in and of itself.
Thanks.
So, but at the same time, you do have a lot of detractors, right? You know,
Oh, yeah.
you know a man by their enemies. So, you know, there have been a lot of concerns about Strybog being just another, you know, power block.
Totally.
The blue toe nut. Comments about you saying Pochfin is for Strybog or something like that. Like, so
I've never said that. I've literally never said Pochfin is for Strybog, but all right.
My bad. Somebody had brought that to my attention, and therefore I hadn't verified it. But that's my whole point. There's a lot said about you.
That's funny.
And so I just wanted to give you the platform to respond to some of that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, yes, I'm a big space villain. You know, like, I'm the leader of Strybog Clade. We're the big spooky triangle people that live in Pochfin, the largest alliance in there. You're going to get a lot of enemies from that. And, you know, inside of the game, I get to be Maldavius, the leader of that. Outside of the game, I'm just myself, you know, and I want to make this game as cool as it can possibly be. That being said, like, Pochfin is for Triglavians, not just for Strybog Clade. You know, there's a lot of different groups that are in here. There's a lot of different groups that we work with specifically because they're aligned with, you know, Triglavian stuff. And I always reach out to those groups and try to talk to them, and they're, you know, part of our community now, is making sure that they are supported in here in the best way that we possibly can. But yeah, no, to be honest with you, I'm used to having enemies. You know, if you're the leader of an alliance in this game, in the range size that we are, you start building a lot of enemies. You get people that either don't like the things that you're saying, or they don't like the way that you're acting, or they go, that group is too big and I hate that they're big. You know, that's normal. I don't think that there's anything different in any other part of space about that. Like, I guess the basic way is, when have you ever heard a nice thing about one of the leaders of one of the big blocks? You know?
Sure.
Probably not. You know, it's the same deal. Everybody always hates the guy that's larger.
But do you feel confident that other pro-Triglavians will feel that you're representative of them? Because, like, one of the problems that we run into is, like, dinos don't want to vote for bees don't want to vote for dinos,
Sure.
blah, 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 blah. Like, is that an issue? There's at least a couple other pro-Triglavian people running for CSM.
There are.
But do you feel like you unite the
Triglavian
vote?
from the people that I've talked to, like most of them seem to like the things that I'm talking about. And most of them who are mad when they come and talk to me and give me feedback end up not being mad afterwards. So from what I've seen so far, a lot of people really like what I'm doing and they like my run for CSM. So I'm not super concerned, but no, I'm not going to get all of the vote. I don't think anyone, should ever assume that they do. So really at the end of the day is vote for me if you think I'd be a good candidate to support your ideas. That's it. I don't want you guys to think that you have to vote for me because of Triglavian or whatever. Vote for me if you think I would do a good job. And that's the most important thing to me. And I hope that so far I've done a good job because I've been working very hard at doing this.
You have been working very hard. You have a video up, which we can show at the end.
Yeah.
You have all kinds of stuff. You were on DTM's Battle Royale, where you made it to the final round.
The last one.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So talk to me about that.
I've done 2 now.
So, and we haven't talked about this very much in my interviews so far, but DTM is also doing interviews, and he's doing in this Battle Royale format where basically each round somebody gets voted out. And so it is a competition in essence. Do you think that what led to you making it to the final round, and how does that reflect to you, winning the election?
In the first one or the second one? Because I've done 2 of them now.
I guess we should start with the first one then, because it sounds like you improved between the 2.
In the first one, I made it to the final 3, and it was me, Extra Squishy, and Brisk, and I had the second highest votes, and Brisk tactically executed me. And good on him, to be honest with you, because I would have done the same thing. Like I was like, well done. Like immediately afterwards, I messaged him, I was like, well done. You took me out because I was too close. I get it. But to be honest with you, it was super fun. I thought it was really cool, and I got a lot out of it. I think CCB got a lot out of it. I think the audience got a lot out of it. Anytime you get a bunch of people that are really interested in the game talking together, especially in a public place, everybody wins. So having those CSM royales was really cool. That one was a lot more heated than the second one. The second one was mostly all of us going, actually, that's a great idea. Like, why isn't that a thing? So the second one was a lot calmer, a lot less like, getting agitated at each other and being like, no, this sucks. But no, the second one was a lot of fun too. And that one ended up with me and Zeramis. And then I ended up winning the last round. So I won that one. And Zeramis Plague is another one of the Triglavian candidates. Got a lot of really good ideas. Also fantastic hair. He's got like dreads, and I have no idea how I would ever deal with dreads, frankly. Like watching that seems like a nightmare, but it was very fun. And I dig it. I would do it again.
Absolutely. Okay, so but I guess ultimately what do you feel carried you through? Was it just good ideas? Was it tactical elimination of your enemies?
To be honest with you, I think it was the community. Like, I completely believe it was the community. Like, the ideas that I have aren't just my own. They're the people who come to me and talk to me. They're just put through the filter of the things that I think, hey, this would make sense. This would be, an easy implementation. This would be something that makes sense to a wider range of players. And I think that at the end of the day, it's really just the people voting on me. It's the community backing that gets me through it. Nothing to do with anything that I'm doing just for myself. I don't think that makes sense.
That's a good answer, and I agree that that you do seem to have a lot of support from the community. Yeah, like I said, I've heard a lot of positive buzz about you from people just musing about the CSM as this election cycle has been going through. But that is, I think, my 50 minutes. So I just wanted to give you your 10-minute warning as we move into the final phase. Normally, like, I stumble through that. You want to play the video
for the 10 minutes?
I can definitely.
It's 9 minutes long.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Solved.
It's perfect for this.
Sorted. Let's get this situated.
You make it big. 1080p video. We actually made this in 24 hours, by the way. I've seen things you capsuleers wouldn't believe. Megathron's on fire in 6VDT. I watched beam lasers glitter in the dark near the Eve Gate. I left it all behind to live in our glorious space hell known as Pochfin. Hi there, I'm Maldavius, the leader of New Eden's most triangular badasses. In Eve, I've spent the last year stealing your stars, disrupting the global economy, and hunting in the forest of glorification. Of course, in reality, I'm just a big nerd that loves our massive sandbox space game. Eve is our big game of Dungeons & Dragons in space, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But there's always a little room for improvement. That's why I'm running for CSM 16, to push for changes we've all wanted. Let's talk about quality of life changes. Dynamic bookmark timers. Right now, we only have the option to auto-delete a bookmark on rigid timers of 3 hours, 2 days, or never. Let pilots create their own timer durations. Remove the multiple choice options and add a calendar selection UI to choose the exact day and hour. Let pilots select a preset to prevent this from being needed every time they drop a bookmark. This would really help people manage locations effectively and make wormhole management less annoying. Change PI to work on a hex grid. Planetary Interaction could be heavily simplified by making built structures snap to a hex grid on each planet. This gets rid of fiddling with literal pixels for optimization and makes the entire experience more clean and enjoyable. This would take a bit of dev work to rebuild the system, and all planets would need to be automatically converted without disrupting existing PI chains, so it has to be done carefully. But I think this would improve PI tremendously. Let's talk about exploration. I really want CCP to make an exploration daily login event. Exploring odd sites and lore behind them really brings players into the universe of Eve. World building is huge for player retention and escapism. Right now, many incredible locations are completely unknown to most pilots. Let's fix this. Create a daily login event like Skilling Spree or Enter the Proving Grounds. Except in this case, a pilot is given the location of a random monument and told to go there for rewards. This will increase immersion and drive conflict at the same time, get people undocked and out in dangerous space together. This is a small thing to bring exploration back into focus for EVE players, but I feel that it could have wide-ranging effects on the overall health of the game. The more a player is immersed in the universe of EVE, the more likely they are to stay. Let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, kill mails. I want CCP to add a timeline. Kill mails should display a timeline of all incoming damage, supportive effects, and detrimental effects. I want to see a graph of my incoming DPS broken down by pilot and damage type. I also want to see a graph of incoming reps per pilot. I want to see the exact moment in that timeline where I was jammed, scrammed, etc. This helps pilots become better after a loss and helps FCs find weak points in line members to help them improve. Remove the mythology of "I think this happened" and give players hard facts to improve with. I also want to see CCP add kill marks to kill mails. Right now, if a ship dies with kill marks, the only one who knows about it is the pilot of that ship. Add the number of kill marks the victim had to the kill mail so that we can celebrate taking down a skilled pilot. Give kill marks more meaning and add them to kill mails. For my triangle friends, let's talk about the Triglavian invasion. I want CCP to continue the invasion storyline. It's pretty clear that the Triglavian invasion brought in a ton of new players. But not just that, it helped to mix people from all areas of New Eden and get them sharing stories and glory together. We need more of this. We need more game-wide story that players can join regardless of alliance or corporation. It helps to break down silos and bring people together in a way nothing else can. I also want CCP to reopen minor victories as conflict sites. As it stands, minor victories have little to no meaning in the game. We need to reopen these as contestable systems and put them in the agency to drive players towards fighting again. Just like in Invasion Phase 3, these systems would change security status based on which faction won the conflict. If Triglavians win the system, then it turns into nullsec with no local. If edencom wins the system, then it turns into highsec. When the conflict is over, new minor victory systems would activate, allowing for a rolling and permanent war to rage between the factions. This gives a reason for either side to fight and gives locals a reason to push for one side or the other. Right now, glorification filaments send you to a random Triglavian minor victory system. These filaments would be changed to warp pilots to active minor victory systems instead. This change would allow pilots to get to the front lines quickly and easily to join in the fight. We want our conflict with edencom back, and edencom wants to fight us again. Give us an endless war with real in-game consequences for every player caught in the crossfire. Let Triglavians cause disruption, and let edencom push for stability. Let's talk about Pochfin. I want CCP to let players anchor Citadels in Pochfin. EVE is a game where permanence does not exist. I fully expect a day when all of our Citadels will be glassed, and I look forward to living through that story. The shame here is that the region effectively has an expiration date. This inevitable permanent loss feels awful to every Triglavian-aligned player. This is why the meme of the blue triangle began. All of us work together to protect these Citadels regardless of owner, because they are sacred and irreplaceable. This isn't good for the region and is very anti-Triglavian. We should be infighting and forming rival clades to push ownership in different parts of Pochfin. We can't do that if we can't put down new citadels to replace bashed ones. Give players the ability to anchor new citadels in Pashfin. Make it tied to standings or with special items from the LP store. Let us build them and anchor them to settle this place. Let us make an empire for Zorya Triglav and fight both together and against one another in our infinite subcap Thunderdome. I also want CCP to rebalance the PvE site payouts in Pochfin. Dread sites are the only ISK faucet in Pochfin right now. They are insanely profitable, but also the only viable PvE in the entire region. This lack of variety leads to issues with player retention and interest in our glorious space hell. I want to shift some of that ISK out of Dreads and into other activities. Right now, the other PvE sites take a lot to complete and only pay between 6 and 8 million, which is a very bad return based on how much you risk on the field. It would be nice to rebalance the reward on these lesser PvE sites, add exploration sites, ice mining, missions for the Triglavians, or other content of some kind. This variety will also increase the amount of small gang PvP in Pochfin and ensure that there is something for everyone. And finally, scarcity. Scarcity as a whole hasn't been good for EVE. It's led to stockpiling and players or groups not wanting to fight for fear of permanent or near permanent loss. The old adage of don't fly what you can't afford rings true here. If you can't afford anything, why would you fly anything? One thing CCP implemented during this time was resource redistribution. This was, and is, a great move. By giving different groups access to different materials, they need to trade between one another. This prevents silos and creates new agreements, conflicts, and rivalries. Conflict is the core of EVE, and making sure nobody has everything they need is a great way to drive conflict. Right now, a lot of players don't trust CCP to bring all of this to a close. They worry about how scarcity can end and what it will do to the game. They also worry that scarcity will never end, or that new industrial changes will bring the same effect into play. What we need right now is for CCP to communicate clearly with us on these topics. They can't give us specifics because it could give advantage to individuals or groups. However, they can talk to us about the general timeframes where changes will start to fade scarcity out. Players will feel more comfortable and CCP will have a public timeline to stick to. As long as that timeline is kept, more players will trust CCP. It's a trust exercise for both CCP and the community.
But Maldavius, how are you going to get any of this done?
This isn't my first rodeo. In MeatSpace, I've been working in the games industry for 16 years. I know how large-scale games are made, what kind of pressure developers are under, and what's realistic to ask for. My goal is to make sure that you know what is possible and that CCP knows your pain points. We're in this together. Communication is the most important thing in game development. As a CSM, my job is to take your feedback and funnel it to CCP in a way that works for everyone. I want them to talk to you about upcoming changes, explain why they pushed for certain designs, and work with you when things don't go as planned. I want CCP encapsulators to feel like they're in the same fleet because at the end of the day, we are. With all of that in mind, throw your questions at me. Let's talk. You can reach me in-game as Maldavius or on Discord as Thor number 5264. Let's make EVE better together.
Very cool. All right. I did have a couple of questions follow up on that. First of all,
Sure.
with the exploration daily event that you're talking about,
Yeah.
made me think about the fact that would you be in favor of like a more robust achievement system put into the game to maybe point to activities or landmarks?
Yeah, I would. I mean, the system that they have in place right now that just keeps tracking of your character, it actually resets sometimes, which is a little bit weird. Like I've had it reset on me once before, and it was like, you've never repped anyone, and then it started giving me like the in-game achievement thing again. I think that'd be cool. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think some people might be upset about it, like, oh, achievements, but like, I don't know. I like achievements in video games, like, to be honest with you.
There you go.
That's kind of neat. It makes me want to explore other things in the game. It makes me want to try other activities I haven't tried before so I can get the cool little badge thing. Even if it has no effect on gameplay whatsoever, I kind of like that, man. Like, I've always liked that in games.
Very cool. Yeah, I actually agree. I will say this about the whole lack of not tracking thing. I don't know if this is the same with you, but I've noticed that because I had that happen a few times. But recently, I've gone back into my tracker and I've opened it up, and it still shows all of my old Abyss stuff and all my old stuff. So like it's almost like it temporarily loses it, but then like I got it back.
Mine permanently did.
You-
Mine permanently lost.
It never.
'Cause it was
Oh
like
wow.
A month ago. Yeah, and it gave me everything was gone. I was back to 0, and I was like,
Well,
whatever.
no, that's what I'm saying. Like, I had that too, where I was like, even like jumping between systems. They're like, congratulations, you've now jumped between 10 high-sec systems. And Ash is like, yeah, thanks. But like,
mine never returned.
Oh,
Mine never
that's-
returned. I was just like, okay, whatever.
yeah,
But
I know.
no,
That's
I think
weird.
it'd be really cool. I think that if they did, I think the tracker was like, I don't know, it's like an achievement system version 0.5, right? Like, if you're gonna have a tracker do this, just give them achievements. Just do it.
The player base was
you're already
really, really against the idea, like every step of the way. So
Really?
yeah, oh, whew, yeah, like people
It's
didn't even
funny
want the
because
tracker in.
It's to be honest with you, I think that a lot of the player base hates change. I understand that. Like, I totally get it. You know, it's an 18-year-old game. You don't want change and that kind of stuff. But you also have to remember, there's a lot of new players that are coming into Eve. There's a huge amount of new people coming into here, and many of them come in here and they're like, "There's no achievement system. I don't know how to play with other players. I don't know what this UI is," and they fail out. The more that you have systems like that, even if you don't use them, newer players attach to those types of things and they want to stay. As weird as that is, achievements are pretty standard in MMOs. Like, that's a really standard, normal thing to have, and it doesn't affect gameplay in any way. So,
Absolutely,
I care. You know.
Well, yeah, and ultimately, like, in my opinion, the people that were against it in the back in the day, it was like almost like selfishness, right? Because it's like, I don't want there to be a thing that makes me even tempted to have to do a thing for an arbitrary reason, even if it's like a title or something like that. Like, they would be afraid that they would have to do some achievement for the sake of doing an achievement, which felt very, I don't know, artificial to players, especially back in the, like, you know, around 2010, 2012 era, where like the Xbox achievement was becoming kind of super everywhere. Like, it kind of made sense to push back against that, but it really does show that, like, as you're mentioning, like, there's been a sea change. And that's the real reason why I wanted to ask about it with you, is because, you know, a few years ago, if I had asked a CSM candidate, I think that they probably wouldn't have been supportive of it.
Really?
But this shows.
I mean,
I like the fact that you're supportive of it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. It's just funny to me because, like, to be real with you, achievements do not affect gameplay in any way, ever. Like, what they do is they incentivize players to try new things in MMOs. They say, hey, if you want to try Logi to get an achievement, maybe go try Logi. Maybe they find out that they've never flown a certain type of ship. Maybe they've never done ECM before. They've never done E-War before, any of that kind of stuff. And they get into those ships and they try them because they're, you know, trying to get the achievement. And they go, wait a minute, I actually really like this. I like doing this kind of thing. This is actually kind of cool. And then they've now found a new thing in the game that they want to do forever. Maybe they go and try the exploration stuff because there's an achievement for it. They go and do that, and now they've found a new thing that they want to do in Eve. The more that you can get players to step outside of their silos and try new stuff in this game, the greater chance they are to stay. And that's really what it comes down to. Get them out in space and trying things. Don't make them just sit in high-sec and mine all day, because they'll just stay doing that until they burn out and leave. You don't want that. You want them to try other stuff. You want them to try a range of things. And I think that's really important. And the achievement system is kind of it's a really simple way to just get players that are driven by achievements to try that. And ones that don't care about achievements don't care. You know, like, there's nothing for them. It doesn't do anything to them.
Well, it's interesting because Valamir in my chat, it points out that in many players' minds, it does affect gameplay because now they feel compelled to do something which changes their behavior. And so again, like, there is a weird like tainted level to it, but at the same time, I strongly agree that, like, ultimately the game is worse for it, like, just on a design level, and there are achievers in this game, and therefore, just as much as there are people that may not want to feel compelled to go to the Eve gate because there's an achievement, there's several people probably that feel taken aback that they can go to the Eve gate and have nothing to show for it. That, I think, is actually a really big problem, that achievers are given nothing, and that's a primary player base component. And I often have been concerned that a lack of achiever support in things like achievements and in other places, Logi on kill mails, a lot of these other pieces that you've hit on, are the very things that have made it so that players that focus on good piloting, you know, being a quality pilot, the people, they end up not sticking with the game not because of the fact that the game isn't deep enough, but because it doesn't have the feedback systems capable of capturing them and giving them the tools to seek mastery. And that.
So here's something that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
About the Logi on kill mails thing. That's one of the things I'd really love to have. I'm primarily a Logi pilot. Love that. I fly a lot of command ships right now, though, because we're under attack all the time. I got the skills for it. I'm going to run it. But in terms of Logi, I went and talked to a bunch of different Logi pilots. The strangest feedback that I received from one of them, I don't want to be on Logi. I don't want Logi to be on kill mails. From a primarily Logi pilot. And the reason
Yeah.
why is because their kill board was 100% snuggly over the entire lifetime of their character. They've never performed a single offensive action ever. So, to be honest with you, I went and talked to Squiz from Z Killboard about this because he owns Z Killboard and he's in our alliance. And I was like, hey, would there be a possibility, if CCP ever added this, would there be a possibility to make it a different color? And he said yes. So if there are things that are like that, where it's like a way that a player would want to keep their killboard completely, I'm only snuggly because they're a Logi pilot, you could make other colors of things. You could do like a purple kill mail or something like that. That is, you only did an assistive action. So those are the types of things that I'm getting into on this, where like sometimes feedback from players leads you into like really weird areas where like, I never expected a Logi pilot to not want to be on kill mails. That's really interesting. Like explore that. What could be done for that type of player?
Yeah. Well, again, back to that skill-based thing. One of the other excuses that I heard way back in the day is that like they don't want to be exposed for when they are ineffective. Both just a bad piloting, but also like if you're a spy and you are being ineffective, the fact that it reports how effective you are would be a detriment to those people. So I have actually heard of people resisting it for that reason too. But ultimately, I mean, that's just a quirk of it not existing. Like if you just look at the design ways of it, like it ultimately creates more problems than it not having it than having it, in my opinion.
I mean, you're always going to get elitism around, numbers in video games. You're always going to get elitism around like, oh, this guy wasn't doing enough damage. He wasn't flying his ship right. He wasn't doing this kind of stuff. That's a thing that you can't get away from. What I'd like to get away from is the mythology around that kind of stuff. I'd rather have the players have the hard stats so they can decide for themselves what is good or bad in a given situation. I want them to know in a better visual format, like, hey, I was screwing up in that fight. I know what I can improve for next time. Not just be like, I don't know what I did wrong and I'm dead.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of line members right now inside of our alliance feel that way. And we as FCs have to go down to them and be like, this is what happened in this fight. I know exactly what's going on and work with each and every one of them. It'd be really cool if they could just pull up their kill mail and go, that's what went wrong. And just sit down and review the kill mail with them. And those are the types of things that I'd rather see, is to grow players in that way, to give them the information they need to decide that stuff, rather than just have them be have it be an unknown to them. Because we do have your combat log. Combat log exists in the game, but it's just a wall of text. Put it in a visual format. It's already in the game. You can build a visual formatter inside of the client and do that kind of stuff. Just feed it right into it over the last X amount of time. There's ways to do this types of stuff with the existing systems in place, which is why I put that out.
I've had a lot of candidates describe themselves as new blood, but this part of the conversation I think drives that home more than anything else. Because like I said, I don't want Logi on the kill mails because I don't want to show off how good or / bad I am. I don't want achievements because I don't want to feel like I have to do something arbitrarily. Like there's a lot. These are all a lot of really old school ideas that ultimately I think has held back EVE Online in previous years. And so I think that it is important for modern game design to be reinforced to CCP. And to that end, I think that you really do represent the modern player base in a very, very real way. I did have one last question.
It's funny because I've played the game since 2007, so I've been
That's
around a
fair.
long time.
It's true, but I mean, being involved in invasions, like a lot of you've been keeping yourself young in a way that other people
the thing is,
maybe
what
haven't.
I noticed is the invasion was development gold, right? I don't even think CCP realized how good of like a system the invasion was for bringing new players in and getting them engaged, or taking old players that were just siloed and sitting in high sec and just being like, I live in this system. I've never experienced anything other than this system and maybe the route to Jita. And like, that's where they lived for 10 years. And suddenly their system went to low sec, went to null sec. They're out there flying with FCs from, like all over the New Eden. They're fighting people. They're actually, getting engaged in PvP. Those people stayed in the invasion. Some of them live in Pochfin with us now. Like, They left that life to be like, there's so much more to this game, and they love it now. If we can get more stuff like that to get people engaged in, that's great. So there's a lot of modern game design systems, such as achievements, that help do that in smaller ways for players. I wouldn't say it's the most important thing to add something like achievements, but they've got most of the system already implemented with the tracking system. So it's not really that far of a jump for it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And again, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that it's the end all be all, but to me, my point is that having a candidate that can step up and say that these are important, I think is really key. Not only because of the design, but because of our history as a community. I think it's important for members of our community, leaders of the community, members of CSM to carry that voice to CCP. Times are different now. We want achievements. We want these kinds of engagements. Congratulations, CCP. You've convinced us. But if you don't follow through on it, then it's going to fall flat on its face. So, let's get to this stuff. I am a bit concerned with some of these things, whether or not you'll hit brick walls because I remember they were talking about doing Logi on kill mails a few years ago, and there's a reason why that suddenly vanished from the public perspective. Maybe you'll be able to figure it out and let us know. I don't know. But
I mean, that's the thing though, is like the only thing that we can do as players is just say, hey, this would be really cool, or hey, I don't like this part of the game, or this is hurting me as a player. It makes me not want to play Eve.
But I did.
You do that, you throw it at the wall, and some of those things are going to stick. Not everything.
Right, and you may not even know which one is going to be the thing, but whatever it is, it might be a thing. But so one last question, I guess. You're talking about the structures with Pochfin, and you doubled down on that on your video. Do you think that there should be some sort of extra step or restriction at all? Like maybe is there an item? Like, do you need to get a special core from the LP store? Or do you have to have enough favor? So do you want?
To be honest with you, what I'd like, you're talking about the Citadels in Pochfin specifically, though, right?
Yes.
Honestly, I would like to have Citadels in Pochfin that required some kind of an item, maybe a core from the LP store. I would like to have Citadels inside of edencom fortress systems so they could do the same thing. Because really, at the end of the day, what you're trying to get people to do is to utilize these spaces that they took and form groups or corporations or alliances around that idea of that story. I think the best way to do this is by incentivizing it. Incentivize them with things that they can do. Right now, Pochfin is all irreplaceable content. Everybody in there can't fight each other because they have to blue triangle to be able to support each other to stop Citadels from being destroyed. People from Kybernauts, people from ITC, people from, Triglavian Unity, like all of these groups come together and be like, no, you will not kill this Citadel. We all work together, no matter which group is under attack. That's not really what, Triglavians are about. They're supposed to be fighting each other. It's supposed to be a hellscape of people attacking one another and doing that stuff. I can't do that, and they can't do that when you can't replace these. So give edencom something cool. Give them a reason to be edencom. Give them some kind of a Citadel bonus or a special kind of item from their LP store to put Citadels inside of fortress systems that are different in some way. And then if you restrict them to those spaces, if you restrict it to a fortress system and you restrict it to Pochfin, it doesn't upset the balance of the rest of the game. So then you don't have all of these issues of like, we have to get all of these materials out into null security space. We have to get all these materials out into wormhole space. It is specific to those environments, which makes them unique and interesting, and it doesn't damage the rest of the game. And that gives CCP a test bed where they can work on these types of things and iterate on this kind of stuff and have new ideas and then go, hey, this is cool. Let's roll new things out to the rest of the game based on what we learned here. And that's, as a game dev, that would be the best option that you could possibly have. That's a great opportunity, especially in a live service game where you get to try something in one part and learn a bunch from it and then roll it out elsewhere. Because that's great. You want that. That's usually what test servers are for, but in Eve, it doesn't work that way, Like you have to have something on a live server for players to really engage with it in a way that is realistic.
So so stepping into La La Land real quick. You go there, There's a summit. They go, okay, Maldavius, I'm so glad that you got elected. I'm so glad because you need to answer this for us, okay? We can either upgrade NPC stations, put in the NPC stations and the systems that are needed there, and make it so that the NPC stations that require, or services that require standings have added advantage to make it so you live there, or we can introduce trig cores in order to make it so that people need those trig cores in order to anchor structures in Pochfin. Which of those two solutions should we put our energy into?
I would say trig cores. I would say trig and edencom cores. And the reason why is because players, when they have their own infrastructure, have a sense of ownership and they feel good about it. The more that players feel invested in that space, the more that they feel like, hey, we did this thing together, we built these things together, the more they're going to want to stick around, the more they're going to want to build communities. If you have it just all around NPC stations, there's a wide range of players that just do not feel good about NPC stations. They don't like them. They don't like the fact that there's no tether on them, and they don't feel like it's truly theirs. You don't want to have just that. I think that's a pretty normal thing for most players. They want to build something.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that answer. I appreciate you coming on and hanging out for a little bit longer than your hour, but I wanted to explore some of those things out of your video. So you obviously have a very, very strong candidacy.
Well, thank you.
The Triglavian invasions, I think, captured the imagination, or at least raised to the awareness of a lot of people. And I personally believe that the invasions are one of the biggest things this last year that has really changed the CSM, or the election this year from last year, right? Last year, there really wasn't that big of an interest. This year, there's been a huge interest in the CSM. And I think that part of it is because people's imagination has been captured. And at the same time, people have seen firsthand the consequences of not having good voices able to deal with these things ahead of time and getting CCP the answers that they need to make difficult decisions to navigate through this unprecedented change in this one in the universe type game. So to that end, I think that you would be an incredible CSM dude. I think that you've got a lot of momentum behind you and a lot of good, and I think that there's good reason for that. So I guess.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, I think that
I mean, the way that I keep looking at it, though, is we just got to keep talking to CCP, and we're all in this together. Like EVE is our game collectively, not just one person. So thank you guys for supporting me, and thank you very much.
All right. And that about wraps it up for me. So thank you for coming, and 07.